In the gray hush of dawn, atop the rugged peaks of the western frontier, 200 figures stood in perfect silence. Not a whisper stirred the frost-bitten grass, not a single horse pawed the earth, and yet every shadow seemed alive with purpose. They had not come to fight. Not today. They had come for something far greater, a fallen daughter, a sacred secret, and a reckoning that could change the fate of an entire Apache people. At the heart of this looming tableau stood Ayani, the eldest daughter of the Apache chief, a warrior by blood and by calling. Her dark hair was braided tightly wrapped with leather cords that told stories of hunts, victories, and rites of passage. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the mountain horizon, reading the winds and the trees as if they spoke the language of forewarning. Today she carried more than the weight of her own survival. She bore the responsibility of protecting a sacred medallion, a relic passed down through generations, holding the map to their hidden winter burial ground sites, whose exposure would bring devastation to her people. The mountains themselves seemed to bend in anticipation cliffs, and canyons casting long, cold shadows over the valley below. Ayani had known the danger was coming. Rumors had whispered through the settlements. Army scouts, gold-hungry men, and one treacherous half-blood traitor who knew the secrets of the land. They sought the medallion, a simple disc of silver, etched with symbols of her ancestors. Yet it held power no outsider could ever understand. The young warrior's pulse quickened as she crouched near a narrow ridge, the medallion hidden beneath her leather pouch. She had seen the trail of destruction left by men who thought they could bend the wilderness to their will. Families torn from their homes, sacred grounds, violated for the promise of coin or favor. Her hands tightened around the straps of her pack. Every moment mattered, every decision could tip the balance between survival and annihilation. Ayani's thoughts drifted to her people, those who relied on her courage, her skill, and her judgment. This was no ordinary morning. The mountains had ears, and the wind carried the steps of approaching danger. Soldiers trained to follow orders, men who believed the world could be claimed with guns, and discipline were now threading paths toward her hidden camp. And yet, Ayani was not alone. Even in this isolation, allies lurked in the shadows, those who understood the cost of honor, the value of life, and the price of betrayal. The tension was palpable, like the silence before a storm breaks. Who would act first? Would the traitor reveal himself, or would the mountain itself provide a shield? Every ridge, every tree, every stone could conceal a friend or an enemy. The stakes were monumental: the survival of her tribe, the integrity of their sacred lands, and the preservation of traditions that had endured centuries of warfare, displacement, and loss. As the sun's first rays began to pierce the morning fog glinting off rocky outcrops, Ayani steadied her breath. The story unfolding on these peaks was not just about combat. It was about duty, about courage, and the unseen threads that connected generations. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the men who sought the medallion were moving closer, unaware of the vigilance waiting for them. Yet the mountain had its guardians, and one Apache warrior, small in number, but vast in resolve, could tip the scales. What would happen when steel met strategy and human greed collided with honor? Who would intervene in the moments before disaster struck? And what secrets hidden for centuries in the heart of these western wilds might finally be revealed? The answers lay in the mists and the shadows, waiting for the dawn to break, and for Ayani to prove that courage, wisdom, and an unbreakable connection to one's people could stand against any threat. Ayani pressed herself against the jagged cliffside breath, coming in shallow, controlled bursts. Behind her, the distant clatter of boots echoed through the canyons, a relentless reminder that the army's scouts were closing in. The silver medallion, hidden deep within her pouch, weighed heavier than its physical mass. It was a tether to generations, a symbol of life and death for her people. Every step she took carried the weight of responsibility, and every choice might mean survival or doom. She had been running since dawn, weaving through narrow passes, leaping across rocky outcrops, her moccasins silent against the rough stone. She knew the men chasing her were not ordinary soldiers. They were trained ruthless and hungry for the promise of gold and favor from their commanders. But lurking among them, even more dangerous, was Fletcher Knox, a man of mixed blood and divided loyalties, once trusted by her people, now a traitor who knew the secrets of the land and the medallion's true value. Knox's cunning made him a threat not easily outmaneuvered, and Ayani's every instinct screamed caution. As the wind swept the pine-scented air around her, Ayani spotted a thin trail leading down toward a hidden ravine. It was risky, slippery, uneven, but it offered concealment and the chance to intercept Knox if he moved ahead of the main patrol. She crouched low, observing the landscape, calculating distance and time as her pulse hammered in her ears. Survival demanded vigilance, precision, and a willingness to trust only those whose intentions were proven. Then, through the haze of dawn, a solitary figure appeared in the trees below. At first, she hesitated, instincts warning her that strangers brought danger. But something about the man, his calm movements, the way he observed without drawing attention, made her reconsider. He was a hermit, a recluse who had retreated from the world. Yet there was a steadiness in his demeanor, a knowledge of these mountains and their secret paths. Ayani lowered herself into the shadows and waited, watching him carefully. The man, whose name she would soon learn was Silas Carter, carried himself like someone who had survived more battles than he wanted to remember. His eyes, pale and sharp, scanned the ridges as if reading messages written in the wind. When he paused and caught sight of her silhouette, he nodded once, not a greeting, not a challenge, but a silent acknowledgement that they shared a mutual understanding. The mountains were their ally, but time was short. Ayani descended carefully toward him. Her steps measured muscles coiled for flight or defense. She revealed just enough to ask for assistance without exposing the full truth. "I need shelter and guidance," she said softly, voice steady, despite the adrenaline thrumming through her veins. "There are men after me, and something they will kill for." Silas studied her for a long moment, eyes narrowing, reading the tension in her posture and the urgency in her words. He knew enough to understand that this was no ordinary errand. The stakes were monumental, and the young Apache warrior had already proven herself by outrunning soldiers and navigating treacherous mountain terrain. He agreed to help, though he didn't yet know the full scope of the mission. Ayani, in turn, weighed every word, every gesture. Trust was a scarce commodity in these wilds, and betrayal could mean death. As they moved together through narrow passes and hidden groves, the tension escalated. Each snap of a twig, each gust of wind through the pines could signal the approach of Knox or army scouts. Ayani's mind raced constantly. How far ahead was the traitor? Would he use the medallion to lure them into a trap? Every shadow held potential peril. She had to think like both a hunter and a hunted, balancing speed with caution, patience with the imperative to act decisively. The partnership was uneasy but necessary. Silas offered the experience of years living with the mountains, knowledge of secret trails, and silent strategies for evading pursuit. Ayani provided insight into the ways of her people, the sacred significance of the medallion, and the urgency of protecting what no outsider could ever truly comprehend. Together they became an unlikely team bound by necessity and the shared understanding that failure would cost more than their lives. It could imperil the survival of a culture. With the sun climbing higher, the stakes sharpened. Knox's presence loomed like a shadow over every turn, and the army's patrols pushed ever closer. Every footfall, every heartbeat was a measure of life and death. Ayani's path was fraught with peril. Yet, in the delicate balance of fear and resolve, she carried the courage of generations, the strength of her people, and the weight of a secret that could not be lost. The sun had begun its descent, painting the jagged peaks in streaks of gold and crimson, turning the mountains into a stage of shadows and light. Ayani crouched behind a craggy outcrop, the silver medallion heavy in her pouch heart, hammering against her ribs. Somewhere ahead, the army had begun to fan out, and in the distance she glimpsed the familiar sinister figure of Fletcher Knox. The trader's eyes scanned the terrain, hunger for power, and gold reflected in his every movement. Ayani exchanged a brief glance with Silas Carter, her reluctant ally whose calm presence had become a steadying force amid the chaos. They were vastly outnumbered, poorly armed, and the terrain offered no easy escape. Yet the mountains were hers to command, every ridge and ravine memorized from years of careful observation. She had lived and trained in these heights, and now she would turn every foot of it into a trap for those who dared violate her people's sacred trust. With a sharp hand signal, she gestured to Silas, pointing toward a narrow canyon partially obscured by a veil of mist and pine. "They'll follow the medallion," she whispered. "We'll draw them in, and they won't know what hits them." Her voice carried no fear, only the quiet certainty of a warrior who understood the stakes. As Knox led a small detachment through the canyon, Ayani executed her plan. Hidden above on ledges and behind boulders, she and Silas triggered carefully placed alarms, rolling rocks, snapping branches, and rustling foliage, making it seem as if the forest itself had risen against the intruders. Soldiers faltered, unsure whether the land was alive with spirits or enemies, and Knox's patience frayed as he pressed them onward. Below, wildflowers swayed gently in the fading light, their white petals stark against the blood-red glow of sunset. Ayani's gaze lingered on them for a moment, a symbol of life hope and the sacred beauty of the land she protected. Every petal seemed to whisper the stories of ancestors lending her courage and resolve. The mountains echoed with the rhythm of boots and heartbeats, a tense symphony of pursuit and evasion. Knox, oblivious to the ruse, clutched the medallion thinking it the true relic and urged his men forward. But Ayani knew differently. The silver disc in his grasp was a decoy expertly swapped moments before the confrontation. The real medallion, safely concealed, remained a secret, known only to her and the elders of the tribe. Time stretched thin each second, a knife's edge. Ayani made her decision. She would not merely defend the medallion, she would confront the threat directly. Using her Apache training, she leapt from one ledge to another with precision, her movements silent, fluid, and deadly. Rocks tumbled strategically, blocking paths, slowing soldiers, disorienting them. She used the forest like a weapon, shadows and light as allies, drawing the army deeper into the trap. Silas followed, providing support where needed, his knowledge of the mountains complementing her instincts. Together, they created the illusion of a much larger force, unseen but omnipresent, striking from impossible angles. Knox's frustration mounted, and in that moment of distraction, Ayani emerged from a concealed ravine, standing tall against the fading sun, her figure framed by the peaks. Her presence alone radiated authority, courage, and the unspoken warning that the land was not theirs to conquer. The army's advance faltered. Confusion spread, soldiers tripping over hidden obstacles, alarms ringing in their ears, shadows flitting across the ridges as if the mountains themselves were alive. Knox realized too late that he had been deceived. The decoy medallion was worthless, and the real one remained beyond his reach. Panic overtook greed, and the sense of inevitability settled like dusk over the canyon. Ayani's decision had been risky, a gamble that could have cost her life, yet it had protected the sacred secrets of her people. Her courage was not reckless, it was calculated, precise, and anchored in the knowledge of the land, her heritage, and the lives of those she defended. As she surveyed the scene, the soldiers' confusion contrasted sharply with the calm dignity of the wildflowers glowing in the sunset, a reminder that some battles were fought not just with strength, but with wisdom, strategy, and the unyielding heart of a warrior. In that moment, the audience feels the tension, the danger, and the exhilaration of survival against overwhelming odds. Ayani stands not only as a protector of a people and their sacred lands, but as a symbol of human courage, resourcefulness, and the unbreakable bond between a warrior and her culture. The mountains remain timeless and watchful, holding the story of a young Apache who refused to yield. As the sun dipped behind the western peaks, painting the mountains in deep oranges and purples, Ayani and Silas moved with quiet precision. Every step was deliberate, every decision weighed against the lives at stake and the sacred trust she carried. The army, disoriented by the clever traps and false trails, was unaware that the medallion they pursued was a decoy, a lure set by Ayani to protect the true relic. From concealed ledges and hidden ravines, Ayani directed the movements of her few allies with calm authority. Rolling boulders and snap branches forced the soldiers into narrow passes, where they became easy prey for those familiar with the land. The mountains themselves seemed to bend to her strategy, cliffs and shadows conspiring to conceal, reveal, and confuse. Even Knox, the traitor, grasped the decoy with desperate greed, unaware that every step brought him closer to capture. With a sudden sweep of motion, Ayani signaled her allies to close the net. Soldiers found themselves hemmed in by unseen forces, their ranks fractured, discipline broken. Knox's frantic cries echoed through the canyon, but it was too late. Every exit had been anticipated, every angle covered. Silas flanked him from a ridge, ensuring there was no escape. The traitor's arrogance had been his undoing. Ayani herself remained a phantom, moving like a shadow among rocks and pines, striking decisively only when necessary. The battle was swift, precise, and merciful. No lives were wasted unnecessarily, yet the lesson was clear. The sacred lands were not to be violated. Knox and his men were secured. The soldiers, beaten not by sheer numbers, but by strategy, knowledge, and courage. The real medallion remained safely hidden, its secrets intact, safeguarded from prying hands and merciless ambition. As silence returned to the peaks, Ayani stood alone for a moment, gazing at the horizon. The weight of victory was heavy, not with pride but with the gravity of what had been at stake. She thought of her people, of the generations who had entrusted her with this sacred duty, and felt the pulse of connection between life, land, and legacy. It was more than survival. It was protection, honor, and continuity. The tribe emerged from the shadows of the forest, drawn by the news of the confrontation's outcome. Elders, warriors, and young apprentices gathered around Ayani, forming a circle of reverence and gratitude. White flowers symbolizing peace, life, and remembrance were laid on the ground near the medallion's hiding place. The ritual was simple, yet profound. Hands touching the earth, prayers whispered in the native tongue, hearts united in recognition of courage, sacrifice, and loyalty. Silas watched from a distance, silent, understanding the depth of the moment. Though not of the tribe, he had been witness to the resilience and wisdom of a people defending their heritage against impossible odds. Ayani's leadership had been tested not only by the enemy, but by the mountains themselves, and she had prevailed through intellect, skill, and unwavering determination. Knox and his accomplices were bound, their greed and treachery rendered powerless. The army, humiliated and disoriented, retreated down the narrow passes, defeated not by brute force, but by the cunning of those who knew the land and its secrets. Ayani allowed herself a single breath of relief, the mountains around her echoing with the stillness of justice served. The tribe's elders stepped forward, offering blessings and acknowledgement. Ayani knelt briefly, touching the earth where the flowers lay, feeling the connection between the past and the present, the living and those who had come before. Every petal, every prayer, every whispered word was a testament to the enduring strength of culture, the honor of duty, and the power of courage, measured not in violence alone, but in wisdom and heart. The evening sky deepened into twilight, and the first stars emerged over the peaks. Ayani stood once more silhouetted against the glowing horizon. The medallion secured the tribe united, and the mountains once again at peace. Her bravery, intelligence, and unwavering loyalty had protected not just a piece of silver, but the soul of her people, ensuring that life, culture, and honor would continue for generations to come. In the quiet aftermath, the audience seized the reward of courage and strategy. the triumph of human intellect and moral fortitude, and the profound respect between those who fight for what is sacred. Ayani's victory is both personal and communal, a story of life, legacy, and the enduring spirit of the Apache, leaving viewers inspired and deeply moved. As the first stars pierced the deepening twilight, Ayani stood atop the highest ridge, the mountains stretching endlessly around her. The wind tugged at her braids, carrying the scents of pine earth and the lingering warmth of a day filled with peril, strategy, and courage. Below, the tribe gathered, their faces illuminated by the fading light, hands pressed to the earth in silent tribute to their warrior daughter, protector and keeper of sacred tradition. The victory was more than tactical, it was spiritual. Ayani's courage, combined with the guidance and support of Silas Carter, had safeguarded not just a medallion of silver, but the very essence of the Apache people's heritage. Sacred burial grounds remained hidden, cultural knowledge preserved, and the legacy of her ancestors honored. One decisive, calculated action, taken with integrity and wisdom, had altered the course of her community's future. The lesson was clear: a single act of bravery or kindness, when guided by principle, could ripple outward to protect, inspire, and preserve the lives of many. Ayani's gaze swept over the peaks and valleys, each shadow and crevice a reminder of the challenges overcome. She remembered the journey, the flight through treacherous passes, the clever traps laid for enemies, the tension of knowing that one wrong move could unravel everything. She thought of the traitor who had sought to exploit her people, of the soldiers blinded by greed, and of the wisdom that had guided her hands, mind, and heart through the crucible of the mountains. In every choice, she had been a bridge between the past and the present, between the living and those who had walked these lands before her. The mountains were quiet once more, but the echoes of courage, honor, and sacrifice lingered. Ayani's victory was a reminder that protecting what is sacred often requires more than strength. It demands foresight, moral clarity, and the willingness to stand alone if necessary. Her story, though rooted in the distant past of the Western frontier, resonates today. It reminds us that defending values, culture, and integrity is timeless, and that even small acts undertaken with conscience and courage can shape communities and preserve what we hold dear. As she lowered her gaze toward the horizon, the sun setting in a blaze of gold and crimson, Ayani felt a quiet pride tempered by humility. The mountains had tested her, and she had met their challenge not for glory, but for the people she loved and the traditions she swore to protect. Her figure, silhouetted against the sky, became a symbol of hope, unity, and perseverance, a living reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, steadfast courage can safeguard the future. To all who hear this story, let it serve as more than a tale of the past. Let it inspire acts of bravery, thoughtfulness, and integrity in your own lives. Whether defending a principle, standing for someone in need, or simply making a choice guided by conscience, your actions can resonate far beyond the moment. Courage and honor are not relics of history. They are living values shaping communities, preserving legacies, and creating connections that endure. If Ayani's story moved you, if her bravery and wisdom stirred something within, we invite you to continue this journey with us. Follow the channel Epic Western Stories, share this story, like it, and leave a comment below. Engage with these tales of courage, justice, and human spirit, and help us keep alive the stories of the frontier, stories of life, struggle, and the enduring power of honor and community. Ayani turned back toward the mountains one last time before disappearing along the ridge. The wind carried her spirit forward, and in every valley, every canyon, and every heart touched by her courage, her story lived on.